Great, another huge family conversations, marriage and family. We've the last handful of conversations we've had, we've talked a lot about leadership strategy and kind of the importance of leadership in the home when it specifically related to parents. I know that there's going to be a lot of things that go into that with how kids play a part, and we've even discussed some examples and whatnot previously. And today we're going to focus a little bit more on kind of the emotional aspect to that. And there's a handful of different subplots within that. But before we kind of dive into that, Mom, is there anything you'd like to kind of review or maybe give us some context as to kind of why we're now starting to dive into some of the specific maybe topics within leadership strategy, review kind of maybe where we came from and why we're going where we're going?
Yes. Um, so I just want to be clear. I'm not an expert. I am leading from a place, speaking from a place, thinking from a place of just my own life experience. And so we have been talking about conviction, for example, what it is. It's leading from a place of values and principles instead of emotion or circumstance. And so the critical need for strategic leadership in a family is it creates kind of the framework of what the whole family unit can operate from. So the parents have their role, the kids kind of have their role. There's this interaction that goes between it. And that's essentially the what of strategic leadership. What is it? It's operating from a place of conviction and values and principles instead of emotional temperature, which is whatever the weather is that day. We talked about some of the stresses that go into that life regarding um, work, you know, sickness, things like that, that compound problems that happen in a family. And so we've also talked about where emotions show up in the body and why that's kind of important to understand about yourself in relation to how you're interacting with people. For example, when I'm feeling a lot of tension, it often shows up in my stomach, in my neck, places like that. And so I can reference into my body and think, okay, what's happening in my life? Why am I acting out or reacting the way I am? And then I can be more reflective and then intentional and come back to my principles and values and act more from them instead of whatever I'm feeling in the moment, right? Like have these words triggered, whatever's triggered. So, and it's hard because we do have stress, we do have bad days, we have sickness. I think about times when I was having a hard time, and often I was on just the precipice of getting sick. Then I looked after, a week or so and realized that it wasn't my best self, or maybe something difficult that I was confronting in my life. So um, instead of tone and temperature leading a family, we're coming back to values and principles. Those are our convictions that we live with. And a month ago, you and I were having a private conversation, and you had made a point how you realize things are you have a better perspective about some things that happened earlier in your life now. And some of that I would come and you and I discussed how as you mature and develop and have more experiences and literally brain development, right? Or experiences help shape you, you think differently about those kinds of things. And it doesn't mean that those earlier views, when you were having them at the time, were invalid, because that
Sure.
was your framework.
Right.
And so it's not wrong or right. And I want to be clear about that. I want to be really clear that shame isn't often helpful. It's okay to feel shame if something you're doing is out of alignment with your principles and values. And so I hope what that does is motivate people to then, okay, I feel guilty about that, right? And I'm feeling shame. And so I need to change. I need to either apologize or do something different or realign my life. Like that's what the purpose of those feelings or thoughts are, is to bring us back into a valued principled place.
Right.
So I wanted to go into emotional maturity for a lot of reasons. First of all, I think it's really hard when we're not naming things that are critical in our homes. And you and I have talked a lot about
Right.
naming feelings, naming situations, naming experiences. And so we're going to name emotional maturity. And for, as far as I understand, a quick example or a quick definition of that is the ability to stay responsible to yourself under stress. So we get dysregulated. We're not perfect. When things get challenging, we have to stay regulated. And there's lots of ways to do that. And I would like to discuss ways that we do that. Um, for example, you have a sick baby, right? All my kids are kind of enduring that. It's really hard to stay regulated when you're worried and you're scared and they're crying or they have a sickness or a rash. It's really hard because you're fearful, right? Underneath all of that is it's your job and you don't know. And so it's really hard to stay regulated. That's a perfect time to get in a big fight with your spouse,
Yeah.
right? Or take things too sensitive that someone says. It's the perfect storm. And it's hard because then you weather this situation and then the things you've said or done, those have consequences too. And so there's a really dynamic reactivity and other things in our life when we're talking about you and I having something. Well, I might not know that your baby was up all night sick,
Right.
and so you are snappish or disrespectful or it's me. And so if I was emotionally mature, I would stop and go, I don't know what's going on for him, but this isn't normal and he's dysregulated. So I could either explore that further or in a work environment, I could be like, okay, we'll go to tomorrow instead. And I, right? Other things, truth telling. That's a part of emotional maturity. So you have people in your life who you think, okay, if I could just tell them this thing, if I could just tell them this about themselves, then they would change. Well, ha ha ha. Or I'm not going to tell them this thing, right? To make me comfortable. So I don't have to deal with this uncomfortable truth. And so it takes emotional maturity to know when that's appropriate. And being silent about things is good too, right? Just because someone asks your opinion doesn't mean they really want it, which
Right.
seems contradictory. But you have to decide, okay, I'll give you an example, and I think I can speak a little bit for Dad. He tends to be one, and I will gladly change what I have to say. He doesn't like to be affected by a lot of other people and what they think. He likes to make up his own mind. He likes his internal voice. He likes to really reason through and figure out things for himself. And you get that sense about him pretty quick.
Yeah.
I am very, very curious. I am really interested in hearing what other people think, exploring a lot of places. That doesn't mean that impacts what I'm going to do. And so sometimes that can be difficult for people because I might ask you my opinion and then I completely don't do what you said.
Right.
And then you're like, why am I wasting my time? Well, it's just understanding just because someone asks, maybe they don't care, but they're curious about what you think, right? And
Sure.
so there's lots of different types of people. That's just two types of people. So emotional maturity is just realizing, you know, you stay responsible to yourself, especially under stress or when making decisions. There's owning your impact versus defending your intent. Well, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, or I didn't mean it to come across that way. Okay, that can be true. It can also be true that that action had impact. Like someone is doing something that annoys you. You, I'll give you an example. There's a person that I know that gets really irritated when people drag their feet. and their
Myself
shoes are
included.
clomping.
Yes.
Like, pick up your feet.
Right.
So you have to decide how much you saying something is going to matter, right? And if it's going to affect the relationship. So can you just let it go? And if it's your kid, well, maybe you're like, okay, don't do that. That's impolite, right? But then you start to see that that hurts their sense of self, and so there's impact to you criticizing, and all of that can be. Another thing is like emotional maturity is people want to have boundaries. They say that's another word. I have to write that down in boundaries. You have to do it without a lot of emotional noise. For example, I hope you're okay with this. Like when you come to the cabin, you guys want to sleep in a bed.
Yep.
You don't want to sleep on the floor.
Correct.
That's a boundary. We're not coming if we have to sleep on the floor. That's it. That's the boundary. And we can accept that. And you can accept that if we don't have a bed, then you're not coming. And that's just, it is, there's not a bunch of drama about it.
Right. Yep.
We will still come, but we'll go home.
Sure.
Right. And so you want a lot of honesty and integrity about whether there's a place for you to stay. And that might be inconvenient for us because we want 100 people to come to the cabin.
Right.
And so it might exclude you. And that's just part of emotional maturity. We sometimes all things can't exist at once
Right.
in
Right.
actuality, but they can, right? More than one emotion or more than one consideration can exist at a time too. And so those are good things to be able to talk about in a family situation. Um, repair. Repair isn't just an apology.
Right.
So we've talked a little bit about you and I had, something that we had to resolve in our relationship. And it wasn't just about, I'm sorry. It was about, I'm going to do something different. And you're going to see that change in my behavior long term
Right.
and vice versa. Right. So when you come to someone that you're having a difficulty with and there's resolution, it's like, okay, we understand each other now. Everything that could be uncovered about the situation has been talked about, uncovered. All of the emotions are back down here. Well, what happens, for example, let's say I say something about you that you find out about that you don't think is kind. And I say, I'm so sorry, I won't do that again. And then you find out a month later, I did it. Right. And so there's this repetitive nature about our own inability to be consistent or honest because maybe I just didn't think it was that big of a deal, or I didn't think it would hurt your feelings again, or I didn't think you would find out about it. Right. And
Sure.
so repair doesn't happen unless the behavior changes. So the I'm sorry isn't good enough. And that's something that you see in little kids. You'll say, okay, say, I'm sorry, take the toy, bonk again.
Right.
And that's just how it works. And so now you have to take the toy away and you can't play with that toy. And now we have to see some consistency in that you're not going to hit people with that toy. Well, they're three, right? And so there's a certain amount of emotional maturity through stages of your life where you start to go, that's not a behavior that's beneficial for me in any relationship. I need to modify and change me in the world that I live in. And so that's what ultimately repair comes to is a change in my behavior in relation to the people that I'm dealing with, because usually it's pretty consistent. Like if you're unhappy with me in this way, then someone else is probably unhappy with me in this way, and definitely your dad's probably unhappy with me in this way. And so I become the person who lacks the maturity, needs to change, let's say. And then kind of lastly, just on a short list, um, choosing long-term trust in a relationship or relationships generally versus short-term relief. For example, I don't have a ton of friends in my life, meaning I don't have a volume. I have a very short list because I don't want to manage a ton of people in my life. I don't need that relief where I could call anyone at any point and go out to lunch. I have people that help me and support me over the course of my life that I really, really trust. That's more valuable to me than a long list of people. Now, that might be true, different for someone else, and that's okay, right? Some people really gain a lot of value by having a lot of friends. They have a group. That's not how kind of my nervous system is built. Um, Especially because my family is kind of my purpose. And so my goal is long term, then my grandkids fill up some of those spaces as well. So that's kind of like emotional maturity is things happen in relation to those aspects, regulation, telling the truth, owning your own behavior and the impact it has, the boundaries that you set without being really crazy about them, right? Like I have to sleep in this bed if I come and stay at this place. Like I can't stay in a different bed.
Right.
I have to oh, I have to sit at this place in the car, right? I have to like people who get really controlling often you can see struggle with some emotional maturity
Right.
because they don't they're really reactive to the environment when it's not predictable. And so when you look at a child, they lack emotional maturity because of that, right? Because their environment doesn't feel like it's always under their control because it's literally not. And
Right.
so that is something you would want to help them learn how to adapt to. Like, nope, you get to sit in your spot in the car because that's the spot for you,
Yep.
right? Instead of having to be like, no, I have to have it just like this. And so you'd want them to develop a lot of adaptability. So let's talk about emotional regulation versus maturity. So emotional regulation is not acting out often what you feel in the moment. I have a client at at one of my classes who she has to be on a certain piece of equipment. She dominates the conversation. She's often highly critical of what's happening. Like she doesn't want to do certain exercises, things like that. And so dealing with her has the potential for everyone, including myself, to become reactive.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? Well, lots of things. I say, oh, I can see you're having a hard day today. That's it. Or I ignore her comments. Or I just allow that that's how she's shown up that day. And there's nothing I can do about it. Right.
Sure.
I can also just like talk to a different friend. I can be like, oh, this is so challenging. Right. And get support outside of this. I don't have to fight with her. I don't have to try and manage her behavior. And so I can notice my own feelings and emotions without exploding. I can tolerate that I'm going to be uncomfortable through this class because she's in it. So, and that happens a lot in work environments, right? You have people that you deal with that you're uncomfortable with, that you don't necessarily enjoy, and you just go, okay, you pause before responding, especially when you're dealing with children, right? They are crying, and you just go, okay. I had a student in class on Thursday, and she was not doing anything I said. She was
Never.
literally not doing anything I said. And I just had to say, okay, Molly, that's not her name. Okay, if it's going to be a hard day where you don't want to listen to my voice, then you might have to leave class a little bit early, right? Like it was just what it is. And that gave us both a moment to think about, okay, what is going to happen if she doesn't listen to me?
Right.
Because it was going to be one of those days. We both knew it was going to be one of those days. Um, And then after the class, I was just able to reset and okay, that was that class. That hour's over. Thank you. We're going to move on. And so regulation is what I choose to do with the emotions that come into my world because I literally cannot control anyone else.
Right.
I can't. I cannot make you do anything different than you want to do. I can only choose what's happening for me. And so maturity is the skill set that I need in order to deal with my own emotions and to deal with the fact that other people have emotions. So younger people, the thought is don't have a lot of emotional maturity. And often that can be true.
Sure.
That's not always true,
Sure.
right? There are people who have a lot of emotional maturity who are young. The next part of this is intelligence. How do I develop the skill set to make things better in relationships? So I'm going to ask you the question, like for you, based on the things that we've kind of talked about or that I've talked about, what are your thoughts? And second question, like emotional intelligence, what does that mean for you?
Yeah. Well, thoughts generally, I would say, uh, as we kind of as you've kind of talked about a lot of these different things, I think I just read a good book the other day, and it was kind of more of a parable, I would say. It's called Leadership and Self-Deception. And have you read it before?
Mhm.
Okay.
I love the Arbinger group. They're really good.
Yes, it was great, and I loved it. I think it fits kind of hand in hand with what you're saying, where so much I think of our emotions are not only it doesn't I would say most of it doesn't have to do with necessarily ourselves. It has to do with how we're perceiving what other people are doing and then how we interact with that person's actions, whether it's a reaction or a regulation or whatever it is. I think when it comes to a lot of these things, I think something that I have come to realize, and I'm still learning a lot about, is is I think just general awareness, right? Am I aware of how not only what am I feeling and how am I treating people, but also am I aware of what other people are doing that might be affecting what's going on for me, and also that maybe things that are going on external of that, kind of like you had said earlier, maybe things that are going on in the background that's causing them to act this way, and I either need to have some compassion or just have good judgment in terms of, okay, I feel comfortable enough saying something or I don't, right? Like I would feel comfortable saying something maybe to my spouse and my siblings and maybe my mom and dad, but I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable saying that to people outside of that realm of trust. But I think also just that awareness in a lot of different ways. And I mentioned, a lot of different types of things just within that. But I would say the to kind of come to your point of the intelligence of that awareness is going to show us where maybe those gaps are, maybe some of those things that have been blind spots that we're now being kind of awoken to, if you will. But also, I would say um, it's helping us to work on those areas because I would say, and in fact, there's, of course, a mentor in my life where every now and then, I'd say probably every other month, I ask him like, what's a blind spot? What's something I'm not seeing that you're seeing that I need to fix because that's where I can't see it if I'm blind to it. And most of it, almost always, it has to do with emotions. Well, I think that maybe there's something here that you could work on because it's not, you tell me you want this, you're telling me this is where you're heading, but this is kind of contrary to that, coming back to the original, previous things of values and convictions. You're saying this is how you want to live, but I'm seeing you do this other thing, and those two things aren't aligned with each
Mm-hmm.
other. And so you need to kind
Mm-hmm.
of, I would suggest you get this thing realigned. But of course, that relationship is there, and I would say you and Dad have done that with me many times as well. Um, but yeah, those are kind of some of my general. I would say awareness is the word that comes to mind, but I would say that's often the thing that we're lacking the most. in all of these things is just because we're talking about maturity, and maturity, I think one of the maybe the synonyms or common words could be used as also just emotional awareness in a sense. But
And I like that. And I'm thinking about this interesting contradiction that often comes up for me in my life, that once I really started to understand it, it was kind of like a big aha. And how often, so I'm going to posit it as a question, how often are you emphatic that you know what the other person is thinking and why they're doing it, especially when you think it's bad, right? And you're like, I know they're doing this
right,
because,
sure,
right? And you're just not you, but like we're
right,
emphatic and like 100%, 100%, this is why they're doing it. And I die on that sword, right? I'm not wrong. Of course, they're persecuting me
and I would
because of
even
it.
say to that, like my first thought when you said that was, well, hardly ever. I'm never that way. And then you gave the example, and it was like, oh no, I'm that way a whole lot more than I think I am. Like I'm totally that way.
Totally. Well, because then, and to your point, that's why you enter in with judgment, right? We do. We enter in with, well, I'm now I get to judge the situation in all of my wisdom and maturity,
Right,
and that's why I'm right, right? And that's often where we kind of end up in, is this moral, sense of, well, I'm right, and that's why they're doing it, and that's why I'm justified in doing what I do because my judgment is so perfect,
right,
right? Which it's not. I'm rolling my eyes here.
sure,
But back to your point too. So we do that. We do that a lot. I do that as well. But the point when you were saying the way we perceive people, often a mismatch.
right,
So what's really going on and what we understand. It's very far apart. Because how could you ever know? We
right,
literally can't. And we're probably going to die not knowing the person closest to us and their motivations and why they do what they do. Well, anyway, we're going to know, but not well, because we just don't even know ourselves that well.
sure,
That's my point, I would say, in relation. So I think about that in relation to myself a lot. Like, okay, Kara, you don't know. You don't know. That's what you know is you don't know.
right.
Um, the
I'm always
next part
being a
of that.
brat, but I gotta remember that I don't know. Maybe something is going on. That, yeah, yeah,
And so you asked the question, you said, like, you would feel comfortable asking certain people. And I have found a very magical question in my own life. This client at Pilates, I'll say to her when she comes in, are you doing okay?
sure, yeah,
Well, I'm fine. That response tells me everything I need to know.
right,
Okay. And it's her, it's not me. Right. And there's nothing I'm going to do that's going to get that. But I have asked other people that who are being difficult. I asked this cute little girl who would not listen to anything I said. Now I gave her a hug and I was like, sweetheart, you doing okay? She's like, I'm kind of sad. And I said, why are you sad? She's like, friend at school doesn't want to play with me.
mm.
And she's 7. That's a big mental and emotional load for her.
Yeah,
Right. And she doesn't know why and she can't figure that out. And it's just trickling. And so I could give her empathy. I didn't have to come out with my, okay, well, we're done, like I would an adult, right? I, as a 7-year-old, I could give her empathy. If this friend at work, if this Pilates client said, I don't really have any friends at work, I'm kind of lonely. I'm a single woman. I've been divorced twice. My kids won't talk to me. Like, that's what I know about her. And that's why I think she acts the way she acts. Is she's
right,
really a sad person, right? And so she kind of takes it out on other people because she doesn't have anyone to kind of do that emotional mental pruning with. There's no one close to her, but she's pretty prickly, and so
right,
people tend to stay away. And I'm not gonna permeate a lot of that in an hour Pilates class. And so when she's like, I'm fine, then I'm like, okay, she's fine. And I take that for what she's literally saying. She's fine. Everything's okay. I'm going to move on
yep,
because I'm okay. Even if she's not acting okay, she's saying she's okay. I can move on for that. So that self-awareness is what kind of comes back, right? And that I think a huge part of emotional intelligence is actually stopping and reflecting, kind of like you're saying. Um, you don't often consider what's going on for yourself and you're trying to develop that self-awareness, but 100% we don't know the impact that we have.
Right. Yeah,
And I can think I know and really not know.
sure.
And so that's what I have been really trying to look for more in my own life. Okay, I think I know myself, but I'm starting to scan my environment more for the impact that I'm having on the people around me. And that is more telling than what I think.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think there's, I've started to notice because I try to pay close attention to because I'm normally the person who, especially at work, it's like, hey, good morning, how you doing? And I often find that by people responding in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable, it helps me to recognize maybe when I'm doing those types of things because I'll often get the response, and it's actually probably my least favorite response of everything I get is they'll say, "Oh, I'm living the dream." And it's like there's something so wrong about you saying that. Like you can tell me things aren't okay, but don't almost be like you make it sound like living well is a bad thing. And I think it's something to kind of your point is things like that have caught me and I've gone, okay, now when am I doing that? When I'm even
Performing.
yeah, I'm portraying something that really is quite a good thing. If someone's living their dream, good for you. That's a great thing. I'm really happy for you. But how hard is it to really just say, no, I'm doing good, or it's been a hard morning, but it'll get better as the day goes on. Like those types of things is what I've found have helped me go, okay, someone's behaving in a way that's making me feel a little bit off. Now, where do I need to take that, become introspective and say, okay, no, maybe I'm doing this in some ways, and how am I doing that? And maybe where am I doing that? And then catching myself in those things, kind of to your point.
Well, and it's inauthentic is kind of, I think, your point, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
so, and yet we live in a culture where it's polite, um, and not just polite, but it's impolite not to acknowledge others, I think.
sure.
Um, and there, so maybe there's different ways to acknowledge someone. Like, hey, Andrew, without the how's it going, right?
Absolutely. Oh, that's where
Maybe
I've
there's
gotten with a
that,
lot of people is I just don't ask anymore. It's like I'm not letting your stuff come into my space. Like, hey,
right?
good morning. And that's it.
Because
Yeah,
there's the people who are inauthentic in the sense that, oh, live in the dream, or they're inauthentic in that they want to just be a victim and dump on you,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? Or so I don't know the right answer for myself, right? Like I have people all the time like, hi Carrie, how you doing? Oh. And I can tell they're like, do you really want to know? And I have to go, huh, do I really want to know? Right.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
hi Carrie, how was your day? Different question,
Right.
different question. Or how's the family? Different question. How was your daughter's soccer game? Different question. Right. And so that I can show up different based on the person that I'm dealing with in front of me in the moment that I'm in, and having the self-awareness to maybe prune down some of my interaction,
Absolutely.
right? So that I can stay authentic to myself, and essentially to them, because maybe I don't want to know.
Because I
Uh,
think that's to your point, I think that's where becoming self-aware is really important. If you have one interaction that maybe turns you off and you're like, okay, I that wasn't what I was looking for. And so maybe I need to create some boundaries to what you said earlier, which I know that that's going to be a topic as we move more into this.
yeah.
But of like, oh, I've now asked mom 3 times how she's doing, and every single time it's been bad. I'm gonna stop asking, and I'm just gonna maybe do something different, right? Or I've asked her 3 times, and every time it's been a great experience and a positive thing. Maybe I should invest a little bit more energy into that relationship to develop a stronger connection or something. But yeah, the emotional side of all of that is being able to recognize, I think, those things to what you've said. And as we kind of wind down, I think that's kind of all of these things I think play a piece in really good things. You know, they carry us and lift us to our convictions and our values and the principles, or they might detract from those things and they might kind of they could spiral. In fact, this is something that for a long time Parker and I talked a lot about is of course you can't really get away with it when it's your spouse. But I remember early on in our marriage, I would ask, "How was your day?" And it was like, "Oh, my day was the worst." And it's like I'm starting to notice a pattern of every day is really, really bad. And yet I don't notice any big changes in those things. And so it started that we had to talk a lot about how most of the time there's bad moments in a day. But the vast majority of our time is probably neutral, if not slightly good. We probably don't have a lot of really good moments. We probably don't have a lot of really bad moments, but it's like right around this threshold of good and bad, however someone wants to measure that. And most of the time it's right above good. And I think that an emotionally intelligent person would say, no, my day was a good day. I'm not looking for it to be a great day, but yeah, I'm just going to stack good days. Good days means I'm living a good life, which means I've got good relationships and all those things. But I'm kind of digressing a little bit, but
No, no, it's actually, I think I want to make just a little bit of a clarifying point in that I think we often fall into a trap of catastrophizing our daily life a little bit,
absolutely.
right? Instead of going, okay, I could reach a little more for gratitude. I'm not hungry today, which
Yeah,
you might say, okay, that's trite. No, it's not really trite
right.
if you've been hungry involuntarily. Now, you can be hungry voluntarily.
Sure.
That's a very different thing,
Yep.
right? But involuntarily, no, that's a huge catastrophe. Um, and so I think we live in a society that puts us in a place that is often negative emotion.
Yeah.
And an emotionally intelligent person would be able to have some differentiation there to the emotional load or burdens, mental loads or burdens that we carry as well, right? Because you can have someone who has heavy emotional burdens, like a sick child, who stays pretty positive emotionally
Right.
in spite of the load that they carry. And so to know yourself comes back to that self awareness. Like, for example, women tend to have this is like in our third conversation. I have a personality profile thing. It's kind of in there, and people can kind of take a little quiz and see kind of how they shake up. And it's not anything diagnosing or anything. It's just an awareness issue of do I trend toward negative emotion? And I would say I tend to. That's common for women. It's often common for women in childbearing years. Like now, I feel like it's way less for me. Part of that is going through menopause of different things. I don't have to be as wired for that. I
Yeah.
don't I don't have this tiny human that I'm taking care of that I really should have some pretty strong emotion for. And so negative emotion is a huge component of what motivates you in taking care of them, right? Like they're crying, they're, unhappy about something, and that affects you very much so. And so to a little bit of a point you kind of said, the people that you're surrounded by do have a huge impact. So if you
Right.
really hate your job, that's really going to affect your home life a ton because that negative emotion carries with you unless you're really, really in tune with yourself and can compartmentalize it. And that's something Dad and I have talked about. He tries really hard. He'll come home and I'll say, "How was work?" And he literally doesn't want to talk about
Sure.
and that's odd for me, right? Because this where I live is my work and the people that I deal with are my work. And so I want to talk about it. Well, that feels negative sometimes too. And so it really is, an important concept. It's an important conversation multiple times. I like the point that you said it's patterning,
Right.
right? There's a lot of patterns in our lives that we implement that deal with these things without us even realizing it. How much of a pattern is in our friendship or our significant relationship, in our home, And so I want to finish up with this idea that emotional maturity, emotional intelligence isn't about feeling no emotions or being calm all the time.
Right.
It's about being aware and being accountable and steady when emotions are high or low. Maybe there's some coldness in the emotion, and that's not great. If we need a little more emotion, your kid comes home from school and won't talk about school, that's something I'd be paying attention to. That might be too low of emotional threshold that's happening, and you got to see if you can penetrate a little bit of what's going on for them. Maybe that trend is too down. And so, you know, our skill is what matters. And so when you're newly married, maybe you got to develop some skills getting along with another person, like directness, accountability, repair, regulation. And that's important because the strategic leadership of the home depends on people being able to hold emotion as an individual and to be able to hold the emotion for the family, what's going on. And so those are just, I think, really important. So we're going to talk more about it, I
Yeah.
think, and why regulation is kind of a prerequisite and how it does keep us steady, and how it kind of fits more in the family. We'll pull it apart a little bit, but I think this is a good introduction to this concept. And I hope the takeaway is the self-awareness piece.
Yeah.
Like, as you talk to people, what is the feedback you're getting? Like, what are you seeing in their eyes? What are you noticing? Do you notice, like, some people are highly reactive, and so you intentionally not saying things that need to be said because you notice you set people off, right? There's a lot of combativeness in conversation. Or do you notice you get small because people get loud to shut you down? Those are all things that can happen in our communication as well. Because for me, I don't really feel safe talking to someone who has to get loud to be heard and be right.
Yep.
Right. And vice versa. Do you feel like you need to get loud and control the situation in order to make things safe? Both of those things can exist at the same time in the same relationship. So
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. I wish I would have had a better understanding a few years ago of all these things. But I think, as you
sure.
said in the beginning, I think sometimes time is a great asset in growth if you're investing in it to actually take steps forward. And
We have eternity, sadly, to develop all these things, but that's a really long time.
daunting yet
Yeah.
comforting. Right. Well, thanks, Mom. I think this is great.
Okay.
I look forward to next week and talking some more about, especially, well, I guess each part independently, especially the maturity, regulation, intelligence as separate things, and being able to unpack those a little bit more. So that's
Okay.
great.
Me too. Thanks.